One aspect of getting things done that David Allen talks about on occasion is that of checklists. And to me, it seems like if the creator of the system and the framework is one to talk about checklists, it seems to me that I would want to include that in whatever structure I'm using for GTD. And in this case, obviously with OmniFocus, I looked for a way to do exactly that. And something I found extremely helpful is just setting up projects for each of these checklists, like what you see here. But in order to use a checklist in OmniFocus, there's a few settings that I do for this specific project. So let's just take a look at those. So if I look at this daily review project, some things to note over here in the project section. It is a parallel project because typically whenever I look at these, I'm going to go through them all at once. You could set up as sequential. It just doesn't seem to make much difference to me because I'm going to go through them all whenever I open it up anyway. So I just leave it at parallel. I do set a context of checklists on this because that's a context that is on hold. So it just makes sure that the items on this list aren't cluttering up the remainder of the system because they are checklists. So I just want to separate them out. I do mark it complete when completing last action because that is what will trigger the reuse of these checklists. It's what keeps them from just disappearing and never coming back. And then if we go down here towards the bottom under the repeat functionality, this is kind of the magical part. I simply have it set to defer another 1 minute. And all that essentially means is that whenever I complete every item on this list, I will have it mark complete automatically because I've got it marked up here under the project for complete when completing last action. So it will automatically complete the whole project when I've hit every item on that checklist, and then it will recreate it and bring it back so that I can then use it again in 1 minute. So it's pretty simple. There's nothing too complicated with it. So just to demonstrate this, let's create a new one. So I'm going to go over here and I know that I want to create a shutdown ritual. So if I create that project and then let's go in and set all of the appropriate metadata that I was just talking about. So I'm going to set the context of checklist. I'm going to complete it when completing the last action. And then I'm going to set this repeat to defer another 1 minute. Okay, so that's all there is to setting up a new checklist. And then if I wanted to add my new items to this list, there we go. And all that you have here is just a series of items that I do for a shutdown ritual at the end of my workday. And just for demonstration purposes, let's pull this up so that we can see what happens if we complete all of those. So if I select all of those items and I check those off, you notice that the project seems to stay there, but actually what happened was it completed that project and then recreated it and deferred it by 1 minute. So I have the whole project there ready to go again, and I can use that checklist again. But if I'm going through it one by one, you can see how I just check them off as I get them done and move on. And then once I get to the bottom of this list, it will then recreate that checklist, and then I can go again. So it's a pretty simple way to use checklists within OmniFocus. Probably the most prominent way that I use these is actually from the iOS side of things. I don't actually use the checklists on the Mac very often. I simply use the Mac to create them, like what we've seen here. And you could do some fancy things like set up a perspective that focuses on a specific checklist. To me, I don't see how that helps out a whole lot because I typically just pull up the list of checklists and start to run with it from there. So to do that, all I'm doing is I'm right-clicking on that project and hitting copy as link. And once I've done that, I get the URL that I can then transfer over to the iOS side of things. So if we shift over there, we can take a look at how that actually works out. So what I've done is I've taken that URL and I have applied it to Launch Center Pro. There's another video that shows how I have that set up. So if I just pull up the 3D Touch for Launch Center Pro, you'll see there at the top I have OF checklists. And that action applies to that URL that I copied over on the Mac. So if I tap on that, it goes up to Launch Center Pro, and then it opens up my list of checklists that I have in OmniFocus. So it's pretty simple. It just pulls it up to that point, and then once I've got it there, all of the work of deciding which one I need to go into is just pretty simple and pretty straightforward. So if I wanted to look at, say, my daily review, I can get a look at it just from right there. So it's pretty basic. It just makes it really easy to pull up any checklists that I have, and then it allows me to recreate them and reuse them multiple ways. But I don't do anything fancy with any perspectives or focuses or anything like that. It just kind of is pretty straightforward with just take me to my list of checklists, and then I'll grab the one that I want to work with straight from there.